Okay, now we're going to do Jubilees, chapters 28 through 30. Jacob gets married a few times. He has children, and his daughter is defiled. That's the section of Jubilees that we're going to cover today. So, Jacob has left his parents, and he's at Laban's house. And we're going to start here with Jubilees chapter 28. It says, "And he went on his journey, and he came to the land of the east to Laban, the brother of Rebekah, and he was with him, and served him for Rachel, his daughter, 1 week." Now you'll notice that we just skipped a bunch of stuff that's in Genesis. Him finding her at the well, and meeting them, and conversation between him and Rachel, him kissing her, even, that I found you, and, I'm from your kin, and all that stuff. Laban saying, "You're bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." All that's not in the Book of Jubilees. But look at what is here in Genesis in chapter 15. When they meet, Laban says to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing?" I mean, there's not anything here where Jacob's really saying, "Hey, I need a job." I mean, I just looked over there and that stuck out to me. But anyway, and it says Jacob loved Rachel. I mean, this was like instant. I guess, we're supposed to understand that it was instant love at first sight, because there's not enough time here for anything to really have happened. Okay. So in Jubilees, it just says that he served him for Rachel, his daughter, 1 week. In Genesis, it says, "And he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. And they seemed to him but a few days, because he loved the love he had for her. Now, I want you to realize, I put this in red, that Jacob is a knowledgeable young man. He's been taught by Abraham and his father. He's had a mother that taught him all kinds of things. And if there was some Torah that said, you must marry the eldest daughter first, Jacob would have been one that would have known that. That I want you to realize, first of all. And Laban, if he were an upright and honest man, would have said to him up front, "Okay, yes, I know you want to marry Rachel, but it's our custom here that you have to marry the oldest daughter at first. So will you serve me? If you serve me for 7 years, I'll give both of them to you," or something. The conversation that it's presented to us is lacking. I mean, even if there were a custom such as this, Rachel herself would have known that. She would have talked to Jacob and said, "Hey, you can't marry me until you marry my older sister. You have to marry her first." That's not even in this conversation. I mean, I looked at this and I really thought about it, and I said, I have so many problems with this. Look at all this stuff that's not happening that logically would have. Okay. Going on in Jubilees. "And in the first year of the 3rd week, he said to him, 'Give me my wife, for I have served you 7 years. And Laban said to Jacob, 'I will give you your wife.'" So Laban knows who Jacob has worked for 7 years. And he's telling Jacob to his face, "I'm going to give you Rachel." But he doesn't. So it's now the year in Jubilees, because it records all the years, 21-22. So Jacob started serving in 21-15, if we work backwards in time. Okay, I just want those dates. I calculated them for a reason later. In Jubilees, continuing verse 3, "And Laban made a feast and took Leah his elder daughter and gave her to Jacob as a wife, and gave her Zilpah his handmaid for a handmaid. And Jacob did not know, for he thought that she was Rachel." So Jubilees does admit there was a deception going on. Okay. And there was a feast. Verse 4. And he, Jacob, went in unto her, and behold, she was Leah. And Jacob was angry with Laban, and said to him, Why have you dealt with me this way? Did I not serve you for Rachel, and not for Leah? Why have you wronged me? Verse 5. Take your daughter, and I will go, for you have done evil to me. Okay? Do you see what that really says? Jacob said, Take her back. You have done me evil. For Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah, for Leah's eyes were weak, but her form was very handsome. But Rachel had beautiful eyes and a beautiful and very handsome form. Jacob was going to give Leah back. Notice that. Verse 6, And Laban said to Jacob, It is not so done in our country to give the younger before the elder. And this is admitted to. It's got the same wording in Genesis. So here Laban says, it's not the law of the Most High. It's not Moses, it's not Torah that came down to us from Abraham. It's not any of that. He said, it's my country's custom and tradition. Now, there is 0 in the 10 Commandments that says how many husbands, wives, who goes first, second, or who controls and who marries whom. I mean, just remember that. That's not in the 10 Commandments. I'm saying that, all kinds of cultures can live by the 10 Commandments, and they can have all kinds of different statutes and ordinances that they create for these things. We certainly have a country that has different laws that are different from the writings of Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. Okay. But here in the text, Laban says it's not done in our country. So it's a custom and tradition of Babylon, apparently. Or because that in that land area. Okay. Now, Jubilees goes on. This is commentary from the Malachi, the messenger speaking to Moses. And the angel says, And it is not right to do this, for thus it is ordained and written in the heavenly tablets that no one should give his younger daughter before the elder, but the elder one gives first, and after her the younger, and the man who does so, they set down guilt against him in heaven, and none is righteous that does this thing, for this deed is evil before Yahuwah. And I command you, the children of Israel, that they do not do this thing. Let them neither take nor give the younger before they have given the elder, for it is very wicked. Okay, I've put this in yellow for a reason. So, I really question this. Is it inserted to promote a specific tradition and viewpoint? If this were written in the heavenly tablets, then why was it not in the 10 Commandments, nor is it in the Pentateuch as a commandment and ordinance in this format? If this were true, then Moses fails to write it down anywhere that I can find. I did research this subject, and below is the only single witness, no second witness, to the justification that men can override their daughters' vows, which most people ignore, says in their youth. I know that it is very much a tradition that fathers have a say-so over the marriage. I'm not disputing that. I'm not arguing against cultures and traditions, okay? I'm just looking at the text. And if this text is correct right here in this yellow section, then it was not written down. I don't find it anywhere. If you do, please correct me. Put it in the comments. Notice below that Numbers fails to mention the vows of boys, fails to mention if a dad dies and now the daughter is in the mother's house, fails to mention any parental rights of mothers at all, nor the obedience to the mother's Torah or law to be followed in Proverbs 1:8. It's Numbers chapter 30. And it starts off with, if a woman also vow a vow unto Yahuwah and bind herself by a bond, being in her father's house in her youth. In her youth. And if her father hears her vow, it doesn't even say a vow of marriage. Okay? If the father holds his peace, then the vow stands. If the father doesn't, he can override her and disallow her. We live in a culture in our day and time, or used to be, in which parents can override their children and the things that they would vow. Parents have parental rights, and it's under attack right now. Let's put it that way. Husbands can override a wife. That happens in our culture right now. In our Western culture, when it comes to legal matters, the husband and wife a lot of times are required to both sign contracts, to both approve and disapprove what is going on within the marriage. And I don't want to go into all of this, but I just thought, outside of the Ten Commandments, there's some similarities between what is written in the scriptures. Keep in mind Jeremiah 8:8. But there's similarities at times between what is written in the Hammurabi Code from Babylon. You've got to do some homework on this. Some of the tribes left Egypt and went north before Moses and went to Greece and Rome. They would still have known and taken the instructions from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob if this were passed down. Now, Numbers 30:6 through 8 talks about if she has a husband, that a husband can deal with the vows that a wife makes. Obviously, this is not talking about marriage. The wording is the same. So what vows is this talking about? It makes me question what vows is verses 3 through 5 talking about, that we all interpret, or all gets interpreted to mean just she wants to marry somebody and the father can stop her from doing that. And this is, again, when I researched this subject here in this yellow section, this is the only place that I found. Maybe you can find some other places in Scripture. Please, we can have a polite, loving, and respectful conversation in the comments. Okay? This verse says right here, but if a husband disallowed her on the day that he heard it, then she make her vow which she vowed, and that which she uttered from her lips, wherewith she bound her soul of none effect, and Yahuwah shall forgive her. Okay, that's fine. But look what it says about a widow. I mean, I really question, it's like maybe Sierra's just not seeing and understanding this section, but look at Numbers 30, verse 9. But every vow of a widow, of her that is divorced, wherewith they have bound their soul, shall stand against her. Okay? Why would a widow or a divorced woman making a vow have it stand against her own soul? This was really confusing to me. So, continuing on in Jubilees, verse 8. And Laban said to Jacob, let the 7 days of the feast of this one pass by, and I shall give you Rachel, and you may serve me another 7 years, that you may pasture my sheep as you did in the former week. And on the day when the 7 days of the feast of Leah had passed, Laban gave Rachel to Jacob, that he might serve him yet another 7 years, and he gave to Rachel Bilhah, the sister of Zilpah, as a handmaid. Okay, so Jacob is into another 7 years, and verse 10 says, and he served yet another 7 years for Rachel. Get this, for Leah had been given to him for nothing. And I'm like, what? I put this in yellow. And I put my comments here in red. This is an indicator that something is, this is really illogical, or this text has really been tampered with. Here in verse 10, it's an illogical statement, even within the Book of Jubilees. Jubilees just said that he served 10 years, he served 7 years for Leah. And yet it says, for Leah had been given to him for nothing. I'm like, nope, not true. Okay, next section, Jacob's children, starting with verse 11. And Yahuwah opened the womb of Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob a son, and she called his name Reuben on the 14th day of the 9th month in the first year of the 3rd week. That's 21:22. And the womb of Rachel was closed, for Yahuwah saw that Leah was hated and Rachel loved. So Rachel not bearing children, according to this, was Yahuwah's doing. And again Jacob went in unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob a second son, and called his name Simeon on the 21st day of the 10th month in the 3rd year of this week. And again Jacob went in unto Leah, and she conceived and bare him a third son, and called his name Levi in the new month of the 1st month in the 6th year of this week. And again Jacob went unto her, and she conceived and bare him a fourth son, and he called his name Yehudah on the 15th of the 3rd month in the 1st week of the 4th week. So Levi is born on the 1st day of the year, and Yehudah is actually born on Shabbaoth, the 15th day of the 3rd month. Now Reuben is born up here in the same year that he married, 21:22. So maybe next year it would be interesting. I have never decoded all the names of the sons, and I just made a note here for myself. It would be interesting to do next year if y'all willing, there's time. Verse 16, and on account of all this, Rachel envied Leah, for she did not bear. And she said to Jacob, please give me children. And Jacob said, have I withheld from you the fruits of your womb? Have I forsaken you? And when Rachel saw that Leah had borne 4 sons to Jacob, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, and Yehudah, she said to him, go in unto Bilhah my handmaid, and she will conceive and bear a son unto me. We have the same kind of thing that happened with Sarah. I mean, Sarah giving Abraham Hagar. 18, and she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and he went unto her, and she conceived and bare him a son, and he called his name Dan on the 9th of the 6th month in the 6th year of this 3rd week. Verse 19, and Jacob went in again unto Bilhah a second time, and she conceived and bare Jacob another son, and Rachel called his name Naphtali on the 5th of the 7th month in the 2nd year of the 4th week, and she gave him to a nurse. And when Leah saw that she had become sterile, and she did not bear, she envied Rachel. And she also gave her handmaid Zilpah to Jacob to wife, and she conceived and bare a son, and Leah called his name Gad on the 12th of the 8th month in the 13th year. Now remember that Jacob's mother prophesied under the influence of the Ruach HaKodesh that he was going to have 12 sons. Verse 21, and he went in again unto her, and she conceived and bare him a second son, and Leah called his name Asher on the 2nd of the 11th month, and in the 5th year of the 4th week. Okay, verse 22. And Jacob went unto Leah, and she conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Issachar on the 4th of the 5th month, in the 4th year of the 4th week. And Jacob went in again unto her, and she conceived and bare 2 children, a son and a daughter. And she called the name of the son Zabulon, and the name of the daughter Dinah, in the 7th of the 7th month, in the 6th year of the 4th week. Now, Genesis has a story here about Rachel and Leah in the days of the wheat harvest. And I just want to say, it is my personal opinion, and it is that of other women that I have talked to, not all of them, that this makes it sound like they're almost practicing witchcraft or something. Remember that the cutting of roots was something that the fallen watchers taught. Yes, I know Noah got a book on herbs, but lots of, it was still fallen watcher knowledge, the cutting of roots, and mandrake is a root, and that's all I want to say. It just is so different here. And we've got the 2 sisters scheming and fighting over something, whereas in Jubilees it has none of that going on. Verse 24, and Yahuwah was gracious to Rachel, and opened her womb, and she conceived, and bare a son, and she called his name Joseph, on the new month of the 4th month, in the 6th year, in the 4th week. Now this is 12 years after Leah had the first child that this is happening. So 12 years later, Rachel has Joseph. Okay. Jacob's prosperity is the next section. Verse 25. And in the days when Joseph was born, Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wives and my sons, and let me go to my father Isaac, and let me make a house. For I have completed the years in which I have served you and your for your two daughters, and I will go to my house, go to the house of my father." The date of this is that Jacob's now been serving 19 years. He's been there, according to Jubilees. Laban responds to this in Genesis in a way that's, I just want to put it there. It's not in Jubilees. But Laban said to him, this is in Genesis, verse 28, "If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that Yahuwah has blessed me because of you. Name your wages and I will give it." Now, they've already agreed to what the wages are, long time ago. But now, because of divination, Laban's finally realizing something, and now he wants to negotiate. This is the kind of stuff that's in Genesis, but not in Jubilees. Okay, in Jubilees, verse 26. "And Laban said to Jacob, 'Tarry with me for your wages, and pasture my flock for me again, and take your wages.' And they agreed with one another that he should give him as his wages those of the lambs and the kids which were born black and spotted and white, and were to be his wages. And all the sheep brought forth spotted and speckled and black, variously marked, and they brought forth again lambs like themselves, and all that were spotted were Jacob's, and those which were not, which were Laban's." Verse 29. "And Jacob's possessions multiplied exceedingly, and he possessed oxen and sheep and asses and camels and men servants and maidservants. And Laban and his sons envied Jacob, and Laban took back his sheep from him, and he observed him with evil intent." I'm not going to go into all the details, but you can tell if you pause the video. I'm not real happy with Genesis and what it has Jacob saying, but I'll keep going. Jubilees chapter 29. Now this is where I start to see some real differences. I mean, not that I haven't seen some already, but this has got some big things for you to pay attention to, ramifications. Jubilees chapter 29. "And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Laban went to shear his sheep, for they were distant from him a 3 days' journey. And Jacob saw," and let's just think about this. When it comes to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph above, that's when they had the conversation about taking his wages. And this says that Laban went to shear his sheep, for they were distant from him a 3 days' journey. And Jacob saw that Laban was going to shear his sheep. And Jacob, in the Book of Jubilees, Jacob's already wealthy by this point. When Rachel has Joseph, he's already a wealthy man. Jubilee says he's already got wealth. It's not like all he's got to his name is the 2 wives. Did you catch that? "And Jacob saw that Laban was going to shear his sheep, and Jacob called Leah and Rachel and spoke kindly unto them that they should come with him to the land of Canaan." See, Laban goes away to get his sheep, and Jacob's ready to leave. "For he told them how he had seen everything in a dream, even all that he had spoken unto him, that he should return to his father's house. And they said, 'To every place where you go, we will go.'" Okay. Now this is in real contrast to, Genesis chapter 31, which starts off with, "Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, 'Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all this wealth.'" So in Genesis, the sons of Laban are saying that Jacob is a thief. Verse 2, "And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then Yahuwah said to Jacob, 'Return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you.'" So the 2 chapters start off with different viewpoints and different opinions of Jacob. Okay. Now I'm just going to focus on Jubilees here. Verse 4, "And Jacob blessed Yahuwah, the Almighty of Isaac his father, and the Almighty of Abraham his father's father. And he arose and mounted his wives and his children on things to ride, and took all his possessions, and crossed the river, and came to the land of Gilead, And Jacob hid his intention from Laban and told him not. See, in Jubilees, they go away. Laban leaves for a 3-day journey, and Jacob leaves while Laban's gone. Now, in Genesis, it does mention that he leaves while Laban is gone. It's down here in verse 20. It says, "And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had and rose and crossed the Euphrates and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead." Okay. Verse 5 in Jubilees. "And in the 7th year of the 4th week, Jacob turned his face toward Gilead in the 1st month of the 21st thereof, and Laban pursued after him and overtook Jacob in the mountain of Gilead in the 3rd month on the 13th of the month." So if you look at the dating in this verse 5, they leave on the last day of unleavened bread. Isn't that interesting? The last day of unleavened bread, and are pursued. "And Laban pursued him and overtook him in the 3rd month on the 13th thereof." That would be a couple days before the feast of Shabbaoth. In verse 6, "And Yahuwah did not suffer him to injure Jacob, for he appeared to him in a dream by night." Okay. Now, from the dating here, Joseph is less than a years old. I just want to point that out. Genesis contains, it's here in the gold color, a bunch of going back and forth about blaming between Jacob and Laban, fighting over what has happened. Verse 7 in Jubilees. "And Laban spoke to Jacob, and on the 15th of those days Jacob made a feast for Laban." That is Feast of Shabbaoth. "And for all who came with him. And Jacob swore to Laban that day, and Laban also to Jacob, that neither should cross the mountain of Gilead to the other with evil purpose." So they made a covenant between them on the Feast of Shabbaoth. "And he made there a heap for a witness. Wherefore the name of the place is called the heap of witness." That's a bunch of stones. "But before they used to call the land of Gilead, they called it the land of Rephaim. For it was the land of the Rephaim, and the Rephaim were born there, giants, whose height was 10, 9, 8, down to 7 cubits. And their habitation was from the land of the children of Ammon to Mount Hermon, and the seats of their kingdom were Karnaim, Ashtaroth, and Edrei, and Mishur, and Beon. And Yahuwah destroyed them because of the evil of their deeds, for they were very malignant, and the Amorites dwelt in their stead, wicked and sinful, and there is no people today which hath wrought to the full of all their sins, and they have no longer length of life on the earth. And Jacob sent away Laban, and he departed into Mesopotamia, the land of the east, and Jacob returned to the land of Gilead. I just want to point out here in Genesis at verse 43, during the arguing back and forth, Laban is answered and said to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters and for their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant." He's claiming that it's all still his. I mean, taking away. I mean, he's treating Jacob like a fugitive slave and him as master by claiming all that Jacob has is his. Then he wants to make a covenant. I mean, I just was reading through Genesis and I was just like, there's so much difference in these two stories right here. I have a note here in blue for those of you who like prophecy that look at the dating of this, and a covenant is made, and I'm not going to cross over these mountains for evil purpose. That's in Jubilees. And there's something there, and I wondered if it has any end times prophecy, prophetic meaning, this covenant that's made between these two groups of people. Just, you can ponder that or make a comment if something pops into your head. Now, before I turn the page, you're about to see something that's really different. I mean, the story of Esau and Jacob is really different here. Just prepare you for Jubilees. Here we go. So Jacob is returning home. Verse 13 in Jubilees. And he passed over the Jabbok, which is a tributary. It feeds the Jordan. In the 9th month, on the 11th thereof. 9th month, 11th thereof. That is 9/11 on the ancient biblical calendar. He crosses over. And on that day, 9/11, Esau, his brother, came to him, and he was reconciled to him, and departed from him to the land of Seir, but Jacob dwelt in tents. So they were reconciled on 9/11. And he left. No wars, no commentary, nothing. When you go look at Genesis, and I haven't put these together because they're so far off in the timing. I mean, there's nothing flowing in Genesis that flows right here in the story with Jubilees to match it up with. It's in Genesis 31:54. Their reconciling was done with bread and not with flesh. They broke bread on 9/11. I did a video about this, and I'm just pointing it out. This is where it came from. And in the first year of the 5th week, in this Jubilee, he crossed the Jordan and dwelt beyond the Jordan. He pastured his sheep from the sea and the heap unto Bashan, and unto Dothan, and unto the forest of Arakabim. Okay. And he sent to his father Isaac all of his substance, clothing and food and meat and drink and milk and butter and cheese and some of the dates of the valley. So instead of offering everything to Esau, which is kind of what Genesis says, Isaac crosses the river and sends his substance to his father. Verse 16, and to his mother Rebekah, also 4 times a year between the times of the months. That means on the remembrance days, those, it means actually on the 31st day from the Enoch calendar, from the calendar in Enoch. There's 4 days, the turning of the seasons. When the 90-day count is up, we have a 91st day. So this text is saying that Jacob sends to his parents things to sustain them 4 times a year between each of them, and sent it to the Tower of Abraham. Verse 17, for Isaac had returned from the well of the oath and gone up to the tower of his father Abraham, and he dwelt there apart from his son Esau. For in the days when Jacob went to Mesopotamia, when Jacob left to go to Laban, Esau took to himself a wife, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, and he gathered together all the flocks of his father and his wives, and went up and dwelt in Mount Seir. So Esau took everything away from Isaac his father and left. And Isaac went up to the well of the oath and dwelt in the tower of Abraham his father on the mountain of Hebron, and thither Jacob sent all that he did send to his father and his mother from time to time, all they needed, and they blessed Jacob with their heart and all their soul. Okay. Now here's where Jacob returns home in Genesis, the Genesis version. In Jubilees, there's no fear of Esau. There's no bowing down to him. There's none of all this stuff that's in Genesis. The story that's in Genesis really is demeaning to Jacob, just quite frankly. And I'm not going to read it all because I'm not doing a study on Genesis. And I'm showing you the difference. Now, Jacob wrestles with the angel or the messenger by the river before he crosses, and that's when his name is changed to Israel. But none of this is Jubilees. See, Jacob's name hasn't changed in Jubilees because of any wrestling with any angel and overcoming and having power with God. That's not in Jubilees. Here's the whole section in Genesis where Jacob meets Esau. You can pause on the screen. I mean, some of this just really, really, I don't want to say is offensive, but it's just, I don't believe it, given the character of Jacob before he left to go see Laban. Doesn't sound like him at all. I mean, Jacob even says to Esau's brother, "For I have seen your face," this is in Genesis, "which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me." Like seeing the face of God. Okay. He calls him my Lord. This is Jacob, who has the birthright and the blessing, is now calling Esau my Lord. Here, you can have everything I have. Okay. Anyway. And then Genesis has Jacob journeying to Sukkot, to the place named Sukkot, and building himself a house, and he made sukkahs for his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is called Sukkot. I just want to point out, we saw earlier in Jubilees where Abraham was the one that started the feast of Sukkot and tabernacles, and Abraham built sukkahs for his family, not for his cattle. Just a big difference. Jubilees chapter 30. Now Jacob goes to Shechem. It says, and in the first year of the 6th week, he went up to Salem, to the east of Shechem, in Shalom, in the 4th month. And I thought, Salem. Salem and Shechem are not spelled the same way. And isn't it interesting that it says Salem here? Okay. Genesis has him erecting an altar. And in Jubilees, it does not say that. Now we're going to get to the story of Dinah. And I want to read Jubilees verses 1 and 2. I'm going to read verse 1 again and flow right into verse 2 and see if you catch something. Verse 1, and in the first year of the 6th week, he went up to Salem, to the east of Shechem, in Shalom, in the 4th month. And there they carried off Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. They who? I mean, I put possible corruption here because there is no they. I mean, you go back to verse 1, and they carrying off Dinah means who? I just thought, are we missing something here? Were there some verses in between that got chopped off? Because even when you're trying to translate the ancient Paleo, there is no they to go back up. You go back up sometimes into prior verses trying to find who the they is, and there's no they there. But notice carrying off here, that's abducting her. Okay, so she was abducted. It says they carried off Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, into the house of Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, and he lay with her and defiled her, and she was a little girl, a child of 12 years. Okay, so she's 12 years old. This is a little girl. And they abducted her. And the prince of the land defiles her. Now in Genesis, we're in Genesis chapter 34, it just says that the prince of the land saw her. He seized her, not a they, but a he, seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. And I thought, what a way to say, to describe the horrific crime and to downplay it. This is why I'm going to talk to you later about Christian radio and something that I heard on it. Who told me, who said some things that, here's what they read in Genesis and think, he humiliated her. Well, she should have just married him. I'm going to go in the commentary section. You're going to hear me talk about it. Okay. So she's 12 years old. And in Genesis, the prince says, and his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. This is after she was abducted and humiliates her, even in Genesis. So after he humiliates her, he loves her. Then he speaks tenderly to her. I mean, this would make a woman sick. Okay. In Jubilees, after she's abducted, verse 3, and he, the son of Hamor the prince, besought his father and her brothers that she might be given to him to wife. And Jacob and his sons were wroth because of the men of Shechem, for they had defiled Dinah. They. Not a he, they. Well, if they defiled Dinah, then they also were a part of the raping of her, their sister, and they spoke to them with evil intent and dealt deceitfully with them and beguiled them. Now, the evil intent, dealing deceitfully, that's the they who did the defiling. That's not the sons. Okay. Genesis downplays this again. It says, because an outrageous thing in Israel, by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing must not be done. Lying with her? I mean, if this is how the scriptures are going to refer to the raping of women as lying with them, it kind of makes you wonder how many women in scripture were actually brutally raped, abducted, and all it says is that a man laid with them. I mean, remember that. Okay, so back to Jubilees. So Jacob and his sons are wroth because they know that they defiled their sister, and they were speaking to them evilly and deceitfully and beguiling them, or trying to. Then Jubilee says, without any delay or negotiation, that's it. They knew these men. They knew that they had done something to defile Dinah, they. And then verse 4, and Simeon and Levi came unexpectedly to Shechem and executed judgment on all the men of Shechem, and slew all the men whom they found in it, and left not a single one remaining in it. They slew all in torments because they had dishonored their sister Dinah. Because they, here's a they again. Not one, they had dishonored their sister Dinah. Now back up here in Genesis, starting in verse 8, these men want to make marriages with their daughters. They want to get cozy with Jacob and his brothers. They want to exchange girls back and forth. They're going to trade in it and get property in it. And they want to give the bride price. And Jacob and his sons know that there's deceitfulness in this thing going on here, and respond. Genesis has them responding with deceitfulness in the, you have to be circumcised routine before you can become one with us. So in Genesis, the men of Shechem agree to be circumcised, and it has, Jacob and his sons being just as deceitful and saying, okay, yeah, you circumcise and we'll agree to you with this thing that we're going to exchange daughters back and forth. That's what's in Genesis. It's not in Jubilees. Jubilees goes from they knew what was going on and boom. Okay. So I want you to remember, this is from the instructions given to Moses upon Sinai about the code of conduct in the kingdom of Yahuwah. What I'm about to read to you. Remember, this is all after the fact, being told to Moses. The difference in these two versions is just amazing. Major differences, and smacks of huge cultural differences that we deal with in our present day in the treatment viewpoint of women. This is why I'm doing a commentary. And how do the men of Yahuwah respond? And later on in Genesis, 2 of the tribes are made to be bad because of this incident. Ponder the depths of what's going on in our society and how men respond. Realize how Genesis could be used in the future to justify some very bad behavior and say it's all acceptable. And Jubilees is going to blatantly say otherwise. So Jubilees, verse 5. And thus let it not be again done from henceforth that a daughter of Israel be defiled. This is the instructions to Moses. For judgment is ordained in heaven against them that should destroy with the sword all the men of Shechem, because they had wrought shame in Israel. Verse 6, and Yahuwah delivered them into the hands of the sons of Jacob, that they might exterminate them with the sword and execute judgment upon them. So right here in verses 5 and 6, it is saying that this thing is not to be done, what they did to Dinah, and that Yahuwah delivered them all into the hands of the sons for execution. And, continuing, that it might not thus again be done in Israel, that a virgin of Israel should be defiled. Doesn't this get ignored by men through time? And Satan's kingdom has responded in kind since then, with the killing of all the young males in the future, and the raping and all the abortions that go on. This is really something to me, anyway. Okay, so in Genesis has Simeon and Levi attacking them because they got circumcised and they were weak, in a weakened state, whereas Jubilee says nothing about that. It says that Yahuwah was the one that gave them into their hands, you see. So it's either, Genesis says, the sons were deceiving and conniving, and that's why they were able to defeat all those men. And Jubilee says, oh no, Yahuwah doesn't like what happened, and they were delivered for their extermination because of their behavior. And in Genesis, Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. So Jacob's afraid. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. Meaning Jacob's not even believing what Yahuwah has told him. Jacob's a weakling who's afraid. And in Genesis, the sons say, but they said, should he treat our sister like a prostitute? Now, that was Genesis. Let's think about what Jubilee says. It says that it might not thus be again done in Israel, that a virgin was going to be defiled like this. Verse 7. And if any man who wishes in Israel to give his daughter or sister to any man who is of the seed of the Gentiles, he should surely die, and they should stone him with stones, for he hath wrought shame in Israel, and they shall burn the woman with fire, because she has dishonored the name of the house of her father, and she shall be rooted out of Israel. And let not an adulteress and no uncleanness be found in Israel throughout all the days of the generations of the earth, for Israel is Kodesh unto Yahuwah, and every man has defiled it shall surely die. They shall stone him with stones, for thus it has been ordained and written in the heavenly tablets regarding all the seed of Israel, he who defiles it shall surely die, and he shall be stoned with stones. Okay. I wrote down possible corruption. With a logical brain, I look at this and I think, why is a girl who's raped by the seed of the Gentiles supposed to be burned with fire? How is it that she dishonored the name of the house of her father, having been abducted and being raped? This does not make logical sense. It's why I said possible corruption here. And we're back to who is the seed of the Gentiles. This is a big, huge rabbit hole word, because the word Gentiles is also a word in Hebrew. It's the same word that gets translated nations all over the place. Its first use is in Genesis, I think, chapter 10, in which it's a certain one of Noah's grandsons in the line of Japheth, where the isles of the Gentiles are. It was that's in English too. It's like what used to be in the ancient Hebrew text before the Masoretic text. I don't know. You don't know. Only certain people know. We're not told. So why does the English all of a sudden have the word Gentile in there, as if it's some specific group of people? And then it uses the same word and says nations. Just something to think about. Verse 10. And to this Torah there is no limit of days and no remission nor any atonement. But the man who has defiled his daughter, the man who has defiled his own daughter? I thought we were talking about we were talking about a different situation, but this says the man who has defiled his daughter shall be rooted out of the midst of Israel, because he has given of his seed to Molech, and wrought impiously so as to defile it. And I thought, wow, okay. Now we've got a man who's defiling his own daughter because he's giving his seed to Molech. And that stumbles you into all kinds of other, verses in the Pentateuch, doesn't it? And this does not flow with Lot, who offers his daughters to the mob in Sodom. Or does it? And then has him called a righteous man in the New Testament. I mean, I'm sorry, but there was so much here that goes through, floods into my mind, and I'm not going to unwrap it all here in this video. I want you to ponder it, chat about it. Come talk to us on Monday night, put something in the comments. I have not found a second witness to this, but that does not mean it does not exist. What's said right here, the man who defiles his daughter and gives his seed to Molech is supposed to be rooted out. What does seem appropriate to this woman is that the response in the line with Yahuwah, seeing the people as belonging to his kingdom and his people and not tolerating this type of activity. That's what makes sense to me, is gang rape and abduction of children is not tolerated. Even in Revelation to the believers, they are not entering the kingdom with such kinds of sins. In Jubilees, the punishment is not one-sided. Both sexes are held accountable. And I'm like, okay, so how can, anyway. In the prophets, we do hear about mercy, forgiveness, and the Messiah confirmed even this sin was forgivable. Back when this was written, no one was in exile, and it was his nation, his kingdom rules. Okay, so I'm just saying, remember, Jubilees is written for Moses. Moses is getting this at a time when it was his nation and his rules. Okay. So I pulled up Deuteronomy 22, 25 through 29, which talks about if a man find a damsel, that's a young girl, that is a virgin, that is not betrothed, and lay hold on her, and lie with her, and they be found, then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he hath humbled her, and he may not put her away all his days. Now, does this sound like what I just read to you? My answer is no. That I see in Deuteronomy, that if the virgin is defiled, he's going to get her, regardless of what happened, and she just has to pay off the dad. That's not in line with the things that we just read, nor Yahuwah's response to this. It's not. Okay, verse 11. And do you, Moshe, command the children of Israel and exhort them not to give their daughters to the Gentiles, and not to take for their sons any of the daughters of the Gentiles, for this is an abomination before Yahuwah. For this reason I have written for you in the words of the Torah all the deeds of the Shechemites, which they wrought against Dinah, and how the sons of Jacob spoke, saying, we will not give our daughter to any man who is uncircumcised, for that we are a reproach unto us. Boy, that's coming out of Genesis, not in Jubilees. And did we really hear all the deeds of the Shechemites that were wrought against Dinah? I don't think so. I mean, it's got in here defiling the daughter with Molech. And I'm just like, it's confusing to me anyway. So Jubilees is referring to the angels having written for Moses' Torah that would be outside the Book of Jubilees. And obviously it does not make it into modern day Bibles. Our Bibles don't contain some of what was just written that we read through. I mean, now we end up with, you can abduct and rape women. All you have to do is pay for them. Basically. 13. And it is a reproach to Israel, to those who live, and to those that take the daughters of the Gentiles, for this is unclean and abominable in Israel. Now Yahusha told his disciples not to go, quote, in the way of the Gentiles, end quote, in Matthew chapter 10. Was he conveying something more than what we understand? What are your thoughts? See, I think there's something more to this that we just don't get and has been removed, so we don't have the full understanding. And Yahusha told them, not to go in the way of the Gentiles or the nations. See, it's the same word. 14. And Israel will not be free from this uncleanness if it has a wife of the daughters of the Gentiles, or has given any of its daughters to a man who is of the Gentiles. This was the going back and forth of the girls that in Genesis the men from Shechem wanted to do. For 15, for there will be plague upon plague and curse upon curse, and every judgment and plague and curse will come if he do this thing, or hide his eyes from those who commit uncleanness, or those who defile the sanctuary of Yahuwah, or those who profane his Kodesh name. Then will the whole nation together be judged for the uncleanness and profanation of this man. Now, that's a mouthful. I think that's a real mouthful. This is saying that this exchanging of daughters, girls, there will be plague upon plague and curse upon curse, and every judgment and plague will curse will come. The only place I know of where plagues and curses were talked about is in Deuteronomy. If he do this thing, or hide his eyes from those who commit this. Remember this hiding of your eyes when I go into the commentary after we get through this chapter. Because there's a lot, it seems to me, of hiding of the eyes going on, I think, sometimes. I mean, I'm not sure that these high standards were communicated in what we received in our text. I so much go back to Jeremiah 8:8 and the shock that Jeremiah had when they pulled the true Torah of Moses out of the treasury, and he understood that they hadn't been following it, I wondered that some of the language in this chapter does make its way. Some of the principles in here do make its way into the standards applied to the Levites. Remember how the Zadok priest Phinehas was rewarded for not tolerating potential defilement. I mean, that priest was singled out for the covenant of Shalom because he killed a man and a woman who were going to go into the sanctuary and defile it, which is just what it's talking about here, profaning the sanctuary. Okay. So did they take Dinah into their pagan sanctuary and defile her? I don't know. Something went on here. Verse 16. And there will be no respect of persons, and no consideration of persons, and no receiving at his hands of fruits and offerings and burnt offerings and fat, nor the fragrance and sweet savor, so as to accept it. And so fare every man or woman in Israel who defiles the sanctuary. 17. For this reason I have commanded you, saying, testify this testimony to Israel. See how the Shechemites fared and their sons. Now the Shechemites and their sons did something to a 12-year-old girl. It doesn't say they raised a statue in the temple or a sanctuary. So what is the sanctuary? Yahusha said we're the temple. How they were delivered into the hands of 2 sons of Jacob, and slew them under the tortures, and it was reckoned unto them for righteousness, and it is written down to them for righteousness. Now, here's a shocker. Verse 18. And the seed of Levi was chosen for the priesthood, and to be Levites, that they might minister before Yahuwah as we continually, and that Levi and his sons may be blessed forever, for he was zealous to execute righteousness and judgment and vengeance on all those who arose against Israel. You see, in Jubilees, Levi is chosen for the priesthood right now in the context of Dinah being raped and the execution of justice and judgment. That's where he was chosen for the priesthood. Not in the Exodus. It was now. in the Book of Jubilees. Now think about Isaiah 66:21 and Yah selecting some for Levites in the end times. This is where the selection of Levi was done, in Jubilees. This is in stark contrast to the lawlessness and incitement to violence in today's society. While Levi was praised, Jubilees is expecting all of Israel to behave at this high standard. This was not just for priests. There was no people can sin, but the priest must be perfect here. This instructions that's in the Book of Jubilees is for all the children of Israel. And Levi is chosen, just like Phinehas was singled out. Okay. Now, I want to talk about a story that I'm going to put here and not in the commentary. I read a lot in my 20s about Native American different tribes and their philosophies and way of life. And I studied some with a certain particular tribe and was exposed to a lot of different things. And then I learned later on this path that some of the people, some scholars and historians believe that some of the tribes are related to the 10 lost tribes of Israel. I thought, okay, there's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. It's a very interesting one too. But in all the readings and things that I read in my 20s, I learned that some of the tribes, they highly respected and valued women and children. Their lives were precious. Men considered them, they treated them with absolute respect and understood they were the vessels where the life of the tribe existed because the women existed. And the punishment for a man who disrespected his wife or other women or children, and I'm talking about, rape here and such. I'm not talking about a husband and wife arguing or that kind of stuff. But the punishment for the man was one of two options. The man either gave up all his possessions, he lost his family, and he had to study with the medicine man, but he basically had to become a holy man. He completely had to lose his life that he had been living and stay with the medicine man and become spiritual, learn about the Great Spirit. And that was his choice. Or the other choice, that was the choice for life that he had. Or he could choose to leave the camp immediately, and he had a 24-hour head start before the warriors of the camp would come and hunt him down and kill him. So he had a choice of life or death. And the choice of life meant he became holy. The choice of life meant that he had to repent and turn away, and he could no longer do what he was doing. And some people say that, some of those tribes are part of the lost tribes of Israel. Well, that kind of philosophy that I read is in line with the Book of Jubilees. You see, I found that interesting. That's why I shared it. Verse 19. And so they inscribe as a testimony in his favorites, talking about Levi, on the heavenly tablets, blessing and righteousness before the Almighty of all. And we remember the righteousness which the man fulfilled during his life at all the periods of the year until 1,000 generations they were recorded, and it will come to him and to his descendants after him, and he has been recorded on the heavenly tablets as a friend and a righteous man. I mean, how is this compatible with Jacob saying, Levi and Judah, you sinned a great sin, and I'm embarrassed and I'm afraid, and you did something wrong. Okay, and this is just one of the many examples in Jubilees that supports the understanding given in 1st Enoch, by the way, that everything we do is written down in heaven, that scribes are writing an account of all we do and say. Verse 21, All this account I have written for you and commanded you to say to the children of Israel that they should not commit sin, nor transgress the ordinances, nor break the covenant which has been ordained for them, but they should fulfill it and be recorded as friends. Now, who else spoke about friends? Yahusha told his disciples at one point that they were walking with him in such a way that he now considered them friends. And it's right here in Jubilees. It says that they should not commit sin, which Yahusha helps us to do, nor transgress the ordinances, nor break the covenant. Verse 22, but if they transgress and work uncleanness in every way, they will be recorded on the heavenly tablets as adversaries. And they will be destroyed out of the book of life, and they will be recorded in the book of those who will be destroyed, and with those who will be rooted out of the earth. Now, if you're not familiar with the different sets of books, I advise you to go watch the video that I did on the Day of Atonement. And in it, I read to you out of the book of Gad the seer, who was a prophet seer in the time of David and Solomon, because it talks about these very books that Jubilees is mentioning right here in verse 22. Okay. Verse 23, and on the day when the sons of Jacob slew Shechem, a writing was recorded in their favor in heaven that they had executed righteousness and uprightness and vengeance on the sinners, and it was written for a blessing. 24, and they brought Dinah, their sister, out of the house of Shechem, and they took captive everything that was in Shechem, their sheep and their oxen and their asses and all their wealth and all their flocks, and brought them to Jacob their father. And he reproached them because they had put the city to the sword, for he feared those who dwelt in the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And the dread of Yahuwah was upon all the cities which were around Shechem, and they did not rise to pursue after the sons of Jacob, for the terror had fallen upon them. They weren't afraid of the sons, they were afraid of Yahuwah. You see, Jubilee says Yahuwah allowed them to overcome the men of Shechem. So heaven is rewarding them up here in verse 23, and then Jacob is angry with them. And the fear of Yahuwah is the beginning of wisdom. Now, I put up here on the screen, I won't read through them all. There's a bunch of verses in Scripture that talk about the fear of Yahuwah is the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of knowledge. And Isaiah said of Yahusha that the fear of Yahuwah would be with him. It's the spirit of wisdom is going to rest with him, understanding, counsel, might, the spirit of knowledge, and the fear of Yahuwah. Fear of Yahuwah, he'll understand it. Okay. Verse Isaiah 33:6, and wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times and the strength of salvation. The fear of Yahuwah is his treasure. So in Genesis, we have the surrounding areas afraid of Jacob and his sons, and in Jubilees, they're actually afraid of Yahuwah. Now, I want you to hear something. I'm going to read you out of Matthew. It's got witnesses in Mark and Luke, but I'm going to read out of Matthew. I want you to hear this with new ears in the context of Jubilees chapter 30, about the 12 sons of Jacob and the 12 apostles. Remember that Revelation 21's New Jerusalem city has a foundation of the 12 apostles and gates for the 12 sons of Jacob. Okay. Matthew chapter 10. I'm going to read verses 5 through 10. These are familiar. These 12 Yahusha sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not in the way of the Gentiles. Now we're going to stick to the English as much as it's all sometimes we can have to go with, and realize that the Gentiles were associated with Molech, and the Gentiles were associated with what happened to Dinah. And into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As ye go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely ye have received, freely give. Provide neither gold nor silver nor brass in your purses, nor scrip for your journey, neither 2 coats, neither shoes, nor staves, for the workman is worthy of his meat. Now, this is something we're all familiar with, but not many keep going. And I want to keep going right now after you just heard the discussion in Jubilees 30. And into whatsoever city or town ye shall enter, inquire who in it is worthy. You're to go and find out who is worthy. Yahuwah sends a man with an ekhorn at one point to find out who's been sighing and crying. And there abide till ye go thence. And when ye come into a house, salute it. And if the house be worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And whosoever shall not receive you, whosoever will not receive the 12 apostles, the apostles that were sent, the foundation of New Jerusalem, nor hear your words, when you depart out of that house or city, shake off the dust of your feet. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. Didn't say for that house, it said for that city. And there was judgment in Shechem unto the whole place. This is Yahusha sending his disciples out. And yes, they preached, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and they healed the sick, and they cleansed the lepers, and they did all this, and they were so excited about it. But we forget the rest of what he told them. He told them about the judgment that would happen. Please connect what you're hearing right now to the week 21 video. And let's review the summary. Before I get to my commentary, let's review this summary, that I've been putting together as we go along in Jubilees. So we get down to the list. We had tabernacles. We had Abraham picks Jacob, and Jacob is the one that creates the great 8th day. Jacob plants the seed for the great 8th day. When he returns home to his father, Levi is chosen for the priesthood because they execute judgment and justice on Gentile men who abduct girls and women of the house of Israel to rape and do something else. I mean, they did things that I don't think we get the whole story. It's even collected to the don't pass your daughters through Molech. And the men just want to buy them as if that's all okay. Now, does this relate at all in your mind to Genesis 6? Because it does mine. And the abduction of the daughters of Adam. You see, they saw and wanted the daughters of Adam, and they abducted them and took them for wives. And we just had a story in Shechem where the daughter of Jacob was taken, and they thought it would all be okay. They just paid for her. Now, what are your thoughts, and what is happening right now in our world? Okay, now I'm going to give you my special commentary. Hi. It's time for my special commentary here at the end. Knowing that I was doing this series on Jubilees, I've been saving quite a bit of information to put at the end of this video. And I think it was best to put it at the end and not the beginning, so that you have the context and you've seen the comparison for yourself now between Genesis and Jubilees. And I'm doing this in the memory of Dinah, which means her judge. That's what her name means. It's the word for judge, Dan, with a hey on the end. So who was Dinah's judge? Well, Yahuwah was her judge, and her brothers, Levi and Simeon, executed judgment and justice. Levi means the one who is joined to Yahuwah, and Simeon's name means the one who hears a report. So once these two brothers who were joined to Yahuwah and heard the report of what had happened, they executed judgment and justice. Dinah's name comes up in some interesting places in scripture, and it's hidden, including the end of Daniel 3:29. So I encourage my students who've been in my courses to go look up Daniel 3:29 and go look at the end of that verse. Go look in blue letter and see what you see. Zakar Yahuwah and his judgment and justice, to remember her judge for the daughters of Yasharel living right now. We're told to Zakar our Elohim and to remember his actions in the past. So for victory and encouragement in the present. And that's what this commentary is all about. Now, you are aware that we live in an upside down and fallen world, and we have fallen judges, don't we? It's a place where the media loves to flaunt things in your face without there being judgment and justice. Here's some of the current headlines. I'm going to just show them to you while I speak, and I'm going to share them with you. I'm not going to read them all, but there's some things that have come up for me just to collect while I was working on the Book of Jubilees. Okay, so I'm just going to show you some of the stuff I've collected. I don't want to talk about a lot of it because it makes me very sad, as it would anybody. But these are some of the things that just don't get talked about and is just tolerated and goes on in this fallen world. And I think more of us, I wish more people were aware of this and men with Zakar. So I had to ask myself, where are the Zakar men? Do we remember what Zakar is? That's why I did a word study on it the other day. We would think that first responders certainly know all about this, and we saw an example of a Zakar man, a young man, in the headlines recently. A young man, a lifeguard, put his life on the line and saved the child. Boy, was that a dramatic video. And the president, I believe, is going to bring this young man who rescued someone in the most amazing waves I saw and I've seen on a beach in a long time. And anyway, that is what we're looking for. Yes, there are a few. There's always, I'm not speaking here against men or, as a group. There's always a remnant. There's always a few who do. But our world used to not be so fallen as it is right now. And there were many more stories than there are now of all the good things that men and women did for one another. And in researching history and opinions on the treatment of women, you will find as many viewpoints on what the scriptures mean as you do religions, meaning many. I mean, if you go research this topic of men controlling women and the patriarchy and what do the scriptures mean, everything has been filtered through various cultural traditions in their viewpoints. And as a woman doing this exercise and having to wrestle and read through Jubilees chapter 30 yet again, one asks, where is the viewpoint that upholds the love of one another that Yahusha clearly taught? Love your neighbor as yourself. Where is the equality of men and women becoming co-heirs of creation? Where is the Zakar male who acts on behalf of others, meaning his daughters and wives, from love of them instead of love of the money they can bring in a bride price? Or selling them outright into slavery. I mean, human trafficking is a real big thing right now and becoming bigger all the time in my lifetime. Reading Jubilees chapter 30 really had to make me pause. It reminded me of the viewpoints of some of the native tribes, of those who literally followed Genesis 3, where the male leaves his clan to live with his new wife's clan. She remains protected by her family and clan always. Abuse of women and children was not tolerated. I talked about that earlier in the video. A woman will say, why are there 0 books in scripture written by a woman? And I know that most people would love to say that's because women didn't know how to write or women weren't allowed to write, but I would challenge that. Just based upon some of the prophetesses who were in scripture. And those women probably knew how to read and write. Women certainly helped educate the children in their households, and writing would have been a part of that. If nothing else, why are there so few stories about women? Why are there few heroines? Why are the few heroines in scripture downplayed and ignored? I mean, women fulfilled in type and shadow the prophecy in Genesis 3:15 to crush the enemy's head literally 4 times. You have the Book of Judith, the story of Rael fighting with Deborah, the woman in Judges 9, chapter 9, verse 53, who threw the stone and crushed the head of Abimelech, literally from a watchtower. We have the unnamed wise woman in 2 Samuel chapter 20, verse 22, who was responsible for saving the city because she threw the fugitive's chopped off head literally over the wall. Why are these women not celebrated more? Yah certainly has brought victories, crushing an enemy through women. The Ezer Kenegdo of Adam and the Chayil Proverbs 31 woman, I mean, these words have rich meaning, including strength, protection, armies, counsel, and much more. The words in Genesis of Levi and Simeon should ring in your ears like a filter on the text. Levi and Simeon responding to Jacob with why should he treat our sister? They said, why should this man, this prince, treat our sister like a prostitute? Yes, why? You should ask yourself this question. When I started working on this very chapter, I got in my vehicle one day and the Christian radio station had 2 pastors talking about this very chapter in Genesis and the story of Dinah. I kid you not. I mean, I was shocked. I'm like, okay. I got in the truck, spur of the moment, and here we go. And I listened very intently to what they said. Do you know what supposedly loving Christian men said? I say this with scorn in my voice, totally on purpose. Their opinion was truly appalling as a woman. I mean, the gist of what they said was, what is the big deal? This is what I hear from many men in scripture. Their voices, their stories, their viewpoint. Yes, I know it's fallen. But are we who want to be called by his name supposed to have this attitude? Are we supposed to remain in a fallen state of being? Is there not any sanctification going on? They stated that the prince should have just married her and Jacob should have just given her to him and all would have been just fine. Righteous Lot, supposedly. I mean, if you're following, you're in this Book of Jubilees video, so we've been comparing everything, including the story of Lot giving his daughters or wanting to give his daughters over to be raped and murdered, probably by a mob. And yet he was called righteous. And we know that Jubilees does not have that in there. But Genesis does. Look at what it does to our society and culture at some point. These pastors gave anyone listening to them the impression that it's okay for this to happen to women. Nothing's going to happen to the man raping her. Just move on. This attitude is a real sickness. And part of the reason some of us left the church. And women who are still there suffer in silence with their voices and their viewpoint not being heard. I could not believe my ears when I heard this. I mean, I really heard what they said. This sickness has pervaded all kinds of places in our society. And in my lifetime, really started with the glamorizing of the ladies dressed as bunnies in popular magazines. The kind my own dad used to read and hide and think no one was going to find it until they did. Nowadays, you can't get away from images, clothing, and people flaunting bare skin immersed into fallen watcher teachings. I mean, it's all over the place. So ask yourself about Yah's true opinion on all of this and what his judgment will really be. Do you think he will tolerate what our society has tolerated? Do you think he really will tolerate what the Christian church has and still does turn a blind eye to? Does the fear of Yahuwah, and I say this in general, I know there are some churches that don't, okay? So this is a little bit of my rant, and I'm don't, I'm saying things in general. I'm not pointing to anyone in particular. We're all in a fallen state, okay? But does the fear of Yahuwah mean anything to you, or the understanding that the Lion of Judah returns and he's not a lamb? And I have not even broached the subject of the lies, delusions, and outright kidnapping of our children by the forces of darkness. Yahusha, the Lion of Judah, said in chapter 18, verse 6, "But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea." That will be fulfilled someday. I'm zakaring what he said right now. That's going to be the case someday for some people. I mean, the stories of abused women and children within even Christian homes, with pastors and other men turning a blind eye as to are numerous, easily found, and has been going on for a long time. And now we're at war in our country because people are turning blind eyes to all kinds of things everywhere. It's parading around on all kinds of devices. And if you look up that word and the etymology of it, it means it's a weapon. The word device means a weapon. Yet the system itself spews out endless words and endless speeches while nothing is done about all manner of issues relating to our sinking ship. The viewpoint in the Book of Jubilees stands in stark contrast. The viewpoint of those native tribes I talked about, some say a few are related to the 10 lost tribes of Israel. They're in stark contrast. The viewpoint of the coming kingdom of the Lion of Judah will be in stark contrast. I already see so many parallels to the falling of Jerusalem and the current situation of our country and Western civilization. I'm not here to point fingers, like I said, at anyone in particular. I grew up in a fallen home to fallen parents and attended a fallen church. We all need mercy, and we're all called to repent. But that actually means to change. To do as the Native American people gave the choice to the man sinning to actually become a holy person, a Kodesh medicine man. That is the only choice. That's the way. That's the way. Yahusha's salvation is into a walk of sanctification and to become holy, period. The fruit of the true vine does not produce fallen filth and look like the world's fake fruit. A good tree does not produce bad fruit. Now, to close out this commentary, I was led to pick up a book, which I have not studied much. It's called the Colburn Bible. And I'm going to read to you from a section that's called the Britain Book. I'm not recommending this book right now. I don't have anything to comment on the scriptural validity of what's in this extra biblical book that calls itself a Bible. But the Ruach prompted me to pick it up for this commentary, and I did. And lo and behold, I fell onto a section in which there's a speech given by a woman of Britain for this video. I had no idea that the speech was in the book. I know where this speech was given. I researched it for this video. It's from the time period of 40 to 80 AD, when Rome was coming against Britain full force. And, that land was in turmoil then, and it's in turmoil now. Britain's in turmoil now. And many of us have the same blood as the woman giving this speech. Our country has close ties to Britain. It reminded me of Deborah's rallying cry into the ears of Baruch and other men who needed to wake up and save the people. So I offer this reading in the same vein. Wake up, Zakar men, and may this fall into your ears. Wake up and restore the Ezer Kenegdo of Adam. Wake up, women. The time must be now. So let me read from pages 520 to 521. They're given by the daughter of a very famous man named Caradoc, the famous leader of the Britons, when they were facing down and holding off Rome for almost a decade. I've left some surprising information about this battle where this speech was given and what the Romans did to this woman in the end and her father. I'm going to share that in our community. Come study with us, study with us if you want to. So I'm going to read this right now. Okay, everybody, I've got the text up on the screen. We're reading from page 520, starting in, I'll start here in verse 11. In the year of Britain, 1127, and boy, doesn't this make me want to go look up and figure out what this dating means, because in this book, obviously it's got a lot of writing in it, and it comes from their own calendar before they were probably putting on the Roman calendar. Anyway, in this year, there was a great outbreak of fighting, and many men sought refuge within the enclosure of Elid, for the free Britons had risen, having been given an assurance of victory no less than the battle goddess herself. So they're referring to the daughter of the famous commander as the battle goddess, calling on Amarith and Camelos. The Britons followed their battle queen, whose heart was afire because of the rape of her daughter. The rape of her daughters. Imagine that. A woman was upset. She stood tall in stature and was serene of face, speaking deep but melodiously. She knew the mastery of letters and spoke 3 tongues. She had fair hair hanging to her hips when not battle-girded. Her head was circled by a golden war coronet, and her tunic was of green and brown interwoven in the manner of men. She wore a short cloak of purple. Thus she spoke before the battle. I speak to you as a woman whose house has been violated and her daughters dishonored. Now you see why I'm reading this, because we saw the reaction of Levi and Simeon to the rape and abduction of their sister. So that's why I'm reading it. I speak to you as a woman whose house has been violated and her daughters dishonored. We have been dealt with unjustly, and I appeal to you not only as a queen, but more so as a woman. Britons who honor their womenfolk cannot regard this lightly. Unlike the squirming Roman Nerotes, I do not rule over servile or docile, unmanly men who are less than men, nor like he who rules over peddlers and hucksters, nor am I like the cowardly man-woman Nero, who surrounds himself with perverts and half-men and slaves who satisfy obscene desires. Such is the nature of the vile culture whose foreigners have been introduced to our fair land. Sound familiar? I am not such as those whose minds are fervored with an evil ferment. I rule over true men, like schooled in craftiness and deceit, real men, born to fight and withstand adversity. The code they live by is that of manliness. True men, indeed, who, in the cause of freedom, willingly heed the call to arms and stake their lives on the outcome. They willingly offered themselves as a sacrifice for the future of their womenfolk and children and their lands and property. That's a definition of Zakar. Next verse, 15. As the leader of this brave breed of men, I fervently plead for the assistance of your strong right arms. Let us not shirk the task or shun the opportunity to strike a blow for freedom. I pray the gods of war, the overseers of battles, for victory. We have the duty to stamp out these infections on our land, these ruthless enemies whose reputation is infamous. They are perverters of justice, promoters of depravity, and servants of greed. They are a race who enjoys unmanly pleasures, who delights in the infliction of pain on the helpless, but cringes like a dog at the prospect of its own suffering, whose approbation is more to be feared, and its friendship more to be shunned than its enmity. Never will I surrender to people whose ways I abhor, nor will I desire to live to see my countrymen treated as servile serfs. May the great godly powers be with us now in the great testing time as we gird ourselves to face the issue. Those brave, inspiring words were of no avail, and Britain was lost. But the spirit could not be quenched, and manliness was maintained. It is not in the victory that a race finds greatness, but in defeat. The knowledge of Christ came not through peace and prosperity, but through persecution. That which is written is not a tale of victory, but of the glory that resides in defeat. The books which are the recipe for victory are written by defeated men. Verse 18, I, Elphid, write these things, but they are not from my own heart, but come from the hand of others. See, this was someone's speech. The daughter's speech. This is that Elfrid who married Marcella, maid of Ilted, after the death of her husband, who tripped over a stone and fell on a spike and died bent like a bow. Now, that's a description. I'm just putting this here because someone actually said who exactly they were that wrote these words. And as you can see on the screen, now we have chapter 3, which goes into Yahusha and Britain, which is part of this book, which is really interesting. But I wanted to share this woman's, the daughter's speech, because they were facing down a foe in that land, and our own country is dealing with a foe, aren't we, who is blatantly becoming more obvious by the day. So I share this. I hope it inspired you somehow. And this is the end of my reading here. Listening to this commentary, let me know if you think it should be extracted out into its own video. I know that those who are watching this Jubilee series will possibly have a different perspective than if I just put this out there all by itself for those who don't. What do you think? Shalom, brothers and sisters. This on Monday night. If you've not considered, if you want to join our discussion group, the information is in the description of the video. We have some interesting word studies that have come out on watchmen and watchwoman. Make sure you see those. Watch the word study on Zakar. It's going to be really good. And just add to that and help cement your understanding of Jubilees and what these words are meaning and who the people are. I hope you've enjoyed that. Please like. Please leave a comment. It really helps YouTube to promote the videos. And I look forward to speaking to you Monday night or seeing you next week for the next set of chapters. Shalom.